Welcome again to my channel and thanks for joining me. What I've decided to call this little video is Hillbilly Canning. The reason I'm calling it Hillbilly Canning is because I'm using very little of the right equipment. But what the object of the exercise is to preserve apples. Now it's not our apple season right now, but in September, October, November it will be, and I just want to prove my preserving for that time. Previously we've preserved in the freezer, and this last year we got so many apples we had to think of other methods. So I bottled them, or as you Americans call it, canned them. Now this is in a proper Kilner jar with the wire clip top, and this was done in September of last year. So this one's worked out splendid. This is in a pickle jar, or a beetroot jar actually, and the lid's still down, and this was done September last year, so obviously this has worked out okay. These were done a few weeks ago just for another experiment, and these lids are down, so these have sealed okay. So I've got some more apples, so what I'm going to do today is just go through the process of preserving them, not in your standard Kilner or mason jars, but in jam jars, which were not designed for preserving. A jam jar is a one-time only use jar, that's what it was designed for. So you might get a percentage of them that don't seal. So you really have got to check the jars, and especially the lids and the seals in the lids. But apart from that, we go through the same process as we would if we were bottling with a mason jar or a Kilner jar. And they do all need to have the little clicky tops on them, so you can tell that they've sealed, and that over the weeks, that's a particularly loud one, you can hear that. You won't be able to do that when it seals properly. So it's important to have that to see that the jar seals, and to check over time that it is still sealed. Now we're dealing with fruit here, which isn't too difficult to preserve because it's so acidic. Right, so in my setup what I've got is my deep pan. I don't have a proper deep pan, so I'm just using the pressure cooker, and the jam jars will fit in the pressure cooker. I can't sit the jam jars directly on the bottom of the pressure cooker. I need a trivet just to stop the direct heat from getting on the jam jars, because the jam jars, as I say, were designed for a one-time use only and will be a lot more fragile than the Kilner jar, so you don't want to thermal shock the jam jars. So we need to sterilise these jam jars to start off with, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to put some cool water in the pan. And just to keep the jam jars upright and stop them bouncing about all over the place, I'm going to put some water in the jam jars as well. What we're doing is basically sterilising them by temperature, and where I live we're at about sea level, so boiling water will boil at about 100 degrees C. If you live halfway up a mountain, say, the higher up you get, the lower the temperature the water will boil at. But I think you'd have to live fairly high before you couldn't sterilise by boiling. So I've just put these lids on just finger tight. They're just all finger tight. And I might put a bit more water in there. But for now I'll just switch the cooker on I've got switch the cooker on and slowly bring that up to a boil. As we all know, putting the lid on will make it happen a lot faster. I'm not this is a pressure cooker, but I'm not pressurising this. I haven't got the weight on top, so there won't be any pressure building up in this. I'm just simply sterilising by boiling. And once we get it to a rolling boil, we should be able to sterilise. Right, I'll move you in a bit closer for this next bit. The apples we're using, they're from the supermarket, because as I say we're not in the apple season, but I'm just practising at the moment. So these are Granny Smiths, which you could in fact eat. They are, eat as they are apple. So I'm going to peel those with a knife, and I'm going to cut them up into fairly big chunks, stick them in a jar there, a bowl, and I'm going to put a little bit of water in there. Not too much because the apples will raise the water level. And I'm going to put a decent amount of lemon juice in, just to stop the apples from going brown. Other things I've got, I might use a bit of sugar just to make some syrup up later on. A couple of just washed tea towels, a spoon, and I'm going to make a funnel out of a plastic jar. And because things are going to get hot, I'll need rubber gloves, and when I'm all done I'll want some labels just to stick on the jars, just so we know when they were bottled, so we can rotate them, latest done, first used. Right, so that's starting to warm up, so I'll just get the apples. I'll start peeling the apples now. There'll be a bit of wastage, but all the wastage will go on the compost heap. At the moment we don't have chickens, otherwise they'd get the peelings. There are some that brown bits on, I'll just take the brown bits off, and then all I do is quarter it. Whip the core out, cut it in half. Make sure it gets soaked in the lemon juice, and that should stop it from going brown. So I'll just carry on doing a few more and I'll get back to you. Now don't use your razor sharp bushcraft knife for this, because as you can see, a lot of the time you're cutting towards yourself. Especially when I've finished peeling it and come to coring it. So you want thin, very thin, relatively blunt knife, because it's going to go through the apple easy enough, and when you're cutting towards your thumb like that, you don't want to slice into your thumb. So use a thin and fairly blunt knife, and then you won't get your preserved apples mixed up with your beetroot. These Granny Smiths are a sharp eating apple, but the lemon juice will make them even sharper. So later on we can put a bit of sugar syrup in if we want. It depends what you're going to use the apples for. You might be using them for sauce, or you might be using them to make pies with. If you're using them to make pies with, we don't like too sloppy an apple. You can always put sugar in when you're making whatever the final product is. Right, I'm going to stop there because I'm going to put the little pan on the boil, and I'm going to parboil these, which is just warm them up and get them just partially cooked. So I've only put a little bit of water in there. We'll just see how these jars are doing. There's little bubbles on the bottom, so it's coming up to heat, but it's not a rolling boil yet. So I'm just going to bring the heat up a bit on them while I start the water for the parboiling the apples. So you can hear this boiling now, so this is on a rolling boil. That's on a rolling boil, so I'm just going to turn that down. I heard a little ting there, I hope it wasn't one of the jars cracking. Right, so we can put the apples in. And we'll give them about 5 minutes just to get thoroughly heated through. Right, our jars have sterilised and our apples have boiled sufficiently, so I'm turning those down just a touch. And now we need a funnel. put the jars on a piece of tea towel just to keep them warm, stop them from cooling down. We'll put the rubber gloves on because it might get hot. So they're both at the same temperature, more or less boiling. So I heard a little ping while these were boiling, so I'm just going to have a quick look at the jar. That looks alright. So I'm just going to spoon it full of apple. You can pack them down a bit, push them down. Right, we're not finished with this. Yeah, we can get them a bit better than that, I think. Right, we're not finished with this yet. We haven't cleaned it, we haven't filled it full of syrup. I'll just put it in there for now. I don't get too much water in there. I didn't inspect this jar, did I? Well, we'll soon find out. It looks alright though. Right, I'm just going to leave that on there. And I'm just going to finish off doing the rest of the apples. While the second lot of apples is cooking, I'm just going to use the water I steeped the apples in, which has lemon juice in it. And put a bit of sugar in, an unspecified amount. And this will do as the syrup just to top the jars up to within about ½ an inch of the lids, just to get all the air out. I'll just put that in the microwave because I'm using both me hobs. I am aware that I've been touching things with the gloves and touching things with the spoon, but you'll see towards the end that we finish them off in the water bath to fully sterilise them again. The main thing at the moment is partially sterilising them and partially bringing them everything to the same temperature. So that's the syrup in there, that's at boiling point. The jars are still at boiling point. I've just got to add the syrup into the jars and then do the final sterilisation. Right, I need the gloves on because it's going to get hot. Right, I'm just topping these up now to within ½ inch of the top of the jar. Oops. That'll do. And with my recently washed tea towel, I'm just going to go around the top of the jar just to make sure there's no apple between the seal and the glass. And put these on just not really tight, but just finger tight. Right, those cans have now been boiling for about 7 minutes, so I've shut them off. I'll let them cool down a little bit before I take them out. I know you might say the tops aren't covered, but I think they've reached way above 80 or 90 degrees in the tops of those cans. Or bottles, as we prefer to call them. I can't lift it off with one hand. Alright, I could if I really wanted to. Right, so at the moment all those lids are bowed definitely up because there's pressure inside all those jars. But as they cool, those lids should get sucked down, and if we stayed here long enough we'd hear them click down. Right then, so that is canning apples the hillbilly way, and I'm certainly not advocating you store all your food in used jam jars, pickle jars, beetroot jars, whatever old jars you've got. but it's nice to know you could if you have to. And if you think you might have to, then it's best to practice. So I will be buying more kilner jars for later on this year. But I will also, if this proves successful, which it has in the past, so if these are still good in 3 or 4 months' time, then I will be using more jam jars or pickle jars because they're a bit bigger. So I hope you've got something out of this video, and I'll see you in a week or so.